Good evening, Year 12. Having a bit of a taste of online society and cultural learning today. This video is going to be about how to conduct your annotated bibliography for your PIP. The reason I'm making this is I told you guys today that I am away Wednesday and Thursday this week. And it's really important that this is done by Friday when the rest of your PIP stuff is due to me along with your assessment task being due. So I'll just remind you again on the assessment notification here what's due for your PIPs on Friday of this week, so the 30th of April at midnight. So you've got the extended response, but the PIP progress report part here you'll find on this page. So what we need is a PIP progress report document 2. I'm going to give that to the teacher on Wednesday that takes you, so you can fill that out then. You will need evidence of PIP log diary entries up to and including term 2 week 1. So make sure you update that regularly, or if not, do a backlog of it, please. You need evidence of an additional primary research method within your draft and your writing. So whether you're going to do an interview, content analysis, focus group, observation, participant observation, whatever it is, make sure that's evident in your draft, please. This is the bit that we are going to focus on today, an up-to-date annotated reference list. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that in this video. The advantage of that being that you can go back and rewatch this as many times as you like. You can speed me up, you can slow me down, pause or play me. And then the last quick section here before I get into that is if you could also have your PIP booklet signed by your parents and yourself as well, showing that you've completed up to chapter 2. That would be fantastic. Without further ado, here we go. So on Google Classroom, where you'll find all the information we're going to look at today is if you click up to your top tab on classwork here. Up the top, PIPs appear, nice and easy. If you ever forget how to footnote, check that document here again. If you want to look at exemplar PIPs, which we're going to look at today, they are also there. I've also updated the PIP scaffold sheet there, so it's easier to see. And your PIP booklets there as well. So what you'll need when doing this is your PIP booklet and these 2 exemplar PIPs, which I've already prepared earlier for you. So here we go. Your annotated bibliography doesn't have a word limit. A lot of the time it's often makes your PIP twice as long. So it's really important that we get on top of it straight away. A mistake a lot of people make is doing this right at the end of the PIP. And while I have no doubt some of you will choose to do that, despite what I say here today, as much as you can, try and keep on top of it. I'm not suggesting that every time you footnote a reference that you stop the middle of your chapter writing to then complete the annotated bibliography, but every few weeks or so, even once a month maybe, just update it and backlog it, just to make sure that you're not going to be spending copious amounts of times doing it. So for example, with this exemplar PIP here, you can see that their PIP itself, the conclusion, ends on page 31, and we can see here that this is page 32 or 33 of 61. So the annotated bibliography for this PIP is literally probably another 4,000 or 5,000 words here. Now, given this PIP got an extremely high mark, and they've referenced copious amounts of sources and details, which is a requirement if you're wanting to hit that top A range. In saying that, that's why I think it's really important that you get on top of it as soon as you can, because can you imagine doing all this the week before? It would be a bit of a nightmare for you. And it can get, if you do it all in one sitting, I don't think your language is going to be effective, because you essentially have to answer the same 3 kind of questions over and over and over and over and over again. Which, if you go to your PIP booklet, which is here towards the very end, I'll show you on your contents page where you can find it, page 37 there. So we'll go back down to that page here. And essentially when you do your annotated bibliography, you have 3 questions that you have to answer within it. It's best to do it in this order as well. That gives you the best logical flow. So your first question is, how is this source useful to your pip? The second sort of part is you need to then elaborate on the details of the source. So what information did it provide you with? Which section of your pip did you use it? And was it particularly relevant for? And then your third one is looking at a comment on its reliability, bias, and validity. So if we're to look at some examples here, you've got some here for you. Now, someone who did their annotated bibliography the best I've ever seen was this exemplar pip here. Now you can see you have to annotate your primary research methods as well as your secondary research methods too. Generally speaking, your primary research methods will be much longer and your secondary research methods will look a little shorter, a bit like this, okay? But those first ones are usually a lot longer. So if we were to look at an example from this secondary source, let's pick this one for example. So what you have to do is you put your footnote in, however you've referenced or whatever referencing style you're using. A lot of people find it really handy to go on a website like Cite This For Me, and what they do is they pick whatever system they're doing. You guys are doing Harvard footnoting. You can pick, say it's a website, and you can put in the link there, and sometimes it'll automatically fill it out for you. If it doesn't, you then hit manually cite and you fill out the details and it will complete the citation for you, and then you can cut and paste that straight into your pip. So that's a really good way of making sure that it's consistent and the same over time. What you'll want to do then is go back to your pip booklet and answer these 3 questions. So question 1, how is this source useful? So once you've put the citation, you provide a sentence or a bit of information on how it was useful. So for example, what Lily's written here is, this source, acquired from the American Psychological Association, exemplifies the LGBT plus community's historical existence and experience of discrimination, and it describes the LGBT experience over time and across cultures. Okay, so that's how that source was useful to her pip, because it gave her information that she required on this particular part of her topic. It was useful in the first chapter of my pip. So here she's saying where it was useful to her pip. Before that, she said what information it provided her with as well. So it was useful in the first chapter of my pip as evidence of the LGBT plus community's historical existence. And then she'll finally make a comment on its reliability, bias, and validity, which she has done here. This source is reliable, unbiased, and valid as it has been published by the American Psychological Association, a reliable source which was authored by academics. Okay. If we were to look at another example, say from a newspaper or something like this, which is here. Again, the first sentence is, how is this source useful to your pip? This newspaper article communicates the opinion of Eddie Clark. The quote, "You can't eradicate homophobia through policy," was central to my personal understanding of the challenges surrounding eradication of homophobia. It was relevant because it gave me potential solutions. In the 4th chapter of my pip, it's always really good to make sure that you write where it was useful in your pip. That just shows the pip marker that you're really in tune with your research and whereabouts in the pip that it entails and falls under. And it's reliable due to their reputable opinion. So this source is valid in that it is accurate, factual, and pertains to authentic social institutions. So essentially, I guess the hard part of knowing this is that the pip marker isn't going to read every single one of your annotated entries. What they are going to do is they're going to read a sample. They probably will read all your primary, because that's the research you've done, so that's why we make them really good. But your secondary, they might read the first 4, and then they might skip down to a random page, read the next 2 or 3, skip down further, and read the next few. So that's just the nature of the beast, and it's really annoying because you put a lot of time and effort into it, but that's just how they mark it. So you got to really make sure that every single source that you're doing is up to scratch. Now, with something like your primary research, it's a really good idea to go into more detail. So what Lily's done here, which is really good, is she's talked about what her questionnaire focused on, or she ended up doing four questionnaires. Yep. So her first one was about that. You can read it at your own volition. And then she talked about the statistics of it, which is really good. Again, going into more detail about the depth of her questionnaire. Again, then she followed a similar pattern here. How was it useful? What information did it provide you with? So this questionnaire revealed a variety of factors to be main contributors. Furthermore, it provided, and again she's weaving in concepts here as much as she can. She gave me qualitative evidence of this and quantitative results. They were indispensable, so they were really important to her PIP, fundamental to her argument. She used the results to produce, and they consistently supported her secondary findings as well. Now, the bit where you get up to saying, how is your own research valid? There's a few different ways you can go about it, and she does both of them here, which is really good. So this questionnaire is valid, ethical, and reliable as participants were notified that their responses would be recorded in my PIP. So essentially she's saying here that she followed social and ethical research principles and methods. Okay, so that makes the source more valid and viable. So making sure that you are reflecting those syllabus contents and concepts on ethical research and name dropping a few things is a really good idea there. Now what she's also done is she's acknowledged that there is some bias in it, and that's okay to do. A lot of the time, if you don't acknowledge that and include that, a PIP marker will look unfavourably upon that, because it is still part of the qualitative nature of research, that a lot of research does have bias in it, but it's about how did you limit the bias as best you could, and that's where you'll score some really good marks. And this is what she's done here. So she said, my own identity as a member of the LGBT plus community with a history of mental illness produces limited bias. So she's acknowledged that her personal connection and affiliation with Atomic produced bias. However, this is the part where she'll sound really good to the marker. However, the synthesis of my research in conjunction with other unbiased sources overrules this. So what she's saying is, yes, I have bias, and so do probably the participants in my questionnaire. However, my primary research synthesized and matched a lot of secondary research, which negates the bias to a certain degree. So that's a really important thing to say as well. So this is a really complete and excellent annotation right here. Now you can go through and read a few, is what I would suggest you do. Now, another thing to really, and Emily's done some good annotations as well. She started with secondary sources. It's preferable to have your primary come first and then you do your secondary. But that being said, her annotations were still pretty good. Now, what you can see the difference here is that, and it's a really hard to do, but one thing you should try and avoid is starting with the same sort of line. So this was extremely useful, this was extremely useful, this was extremely useful, this was useful. So what you see Lily do here is the start of hers are always different. Now she talks about it being useful, but you can see that the idea that it changes a lot. So she talks about, she introduces this newspaper article, this web page, this website. So how she's actually done it, and what I've just noticed, is that she's flipped the order of this. So she's gone with what information it provided her with, and then she was saying how it was useful and relevant here. So if that could work for you, that could work really well. The main thing is you definitely want this part last, because that's the bit that leaves the punch with the marker. But as long as you're covering all these three within the annotations themselves, it's not too much of a big deal. But making sure that, I would say that 3 is definitely last, but you can mix up 2 and 1 depending on the flow if you want. That would probably actually be a good idea even, because you can see with Emily's, it kind of almost looks repetitive at the start, whereas with Lily's it's more, some parts are kind of repetitive here as well. So maybe mixing up the idea of starting with question 1 for some of them and then starting on question 2 with others might be a really good idea to actually differentiate it a little bit. Now the last thing I'll probably leave you with here is don't reinvent the wheel. These annotations are really tedious and monotonous at times, I'm not going to lie. But what you have here, especially in Lily's pip and as well as Emily's, is you have some really great wordage and examples that you can use and mimic as well. Okay, so really take heed of this as an example. I mean, she's got tons of footnotes here. I think she footnoted like 136 times. So there's definitely a lot of sources here that you can pick up and use. I would definitely mimic the structure that she's taken here, considering she got a near perfect mark for her pip. So that's really good here. And again, looking at different pips around the place. We've still got those physical copies in the library that you can grab anytime you like that I've printed off. So really having those open to help you with your annotations is really important. Once you do a few, you'll get into the rhythm and get the feel of it a little bit. So don't give up straight away, or don't, I guess, start trying to do it and then give up and then wait for me to come again. You can, again, like I said, pause, rewind this video, attempt a few, and then if you're still struggling, of course, come and see me. But I really want you guys to try attempt a few first before you come to me. Obviously, I'll definitely check them. But as long as you're getting these 3 core bits of information in, you can't go too wrong. Okay, so that's how to do annotated bibliography. Please make sure that is done by Friday when it's due. I don't think there is anything else that I want to say about that. And if I do, I'll just put it as a comment. Okay, so thanks for watching if you made it this far. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks, guys. I hope this was helpful. Bye.